Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat at andito na naman ang inyong Lolo Ray para sa isa na namang edisyon ng ating pagbabasa-basa ng mga batas. Yung mga batas na babasahin natin ngayong gabi ay may kinalaman pa rin sa mercantile o commercial law. So unahin natin itong the PriceAct na sinasabi. Ito yung Republic Act 7581, an act providing protection to consumers by stabilizing the prices of basic necessities and prime commodities and by prescribing measures against undue price increases during emergency situations and like occasions. Okay, magsimula na tayo sa Section 2, Declaration of Basic Policy. It is the policy of the state to ensure the availability of basic necessities and prime commodities at reasonable prices at all times without denying legitimate business a fair return on investment, sabi niya. So to these ends, the state shall, number 1, develop, adopt, and promulgate measures to promote productivity in basic necessities and prime commodities. Number 2, develop an improved and efficient transport and distribution system. Number 3, develop, adopt, and promulgate measures to stabilize prices at reasonable levels. Number 4, institute appropriate penalties for illegal price manipulation and other violations of this act. And number 5, establish a mechanism that will readily protect consumers from inadequate supply and unreasonable price increase on occasions of calamities, emergencies, and like occurrences. So yun ang layunin. Kaya ginawa itong batas na ito. Okay, tingnan muna natin yung definition of terms, Basic necessities includes rice, corn, bread, fish, dried and canned fish and other marine products, fresh pork, beef and poultry meal, fresh eggs, fresh and processed milk, fresh vegetables, root crops, coffee, sugar, cooking oil, salt, laundry soap, detergents, firewood, charcoal, candles, and drugs classified as essentials by the Department of Health. Okay, number 2, butter fund means a contingent fund in the budget of the implementing agency which shall not be used in its normal or regular operations but only for purposes provided for in this act. Okay, butter fund is a contingency fund. Implementing agency means the department, agency, or office of the government which has jurisdiction over a basic necessity or prime commodity as defined in this act, which shall be letter A, the Department of Agriculture. Pag ang pinag-uusapan daw ay agricultural crops, fish and other marine products, fresh meat and other farm inputs. Letter B, the DOH, Department of Health with reference to drugs. Letter C, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources with reference to wood and other forest products. And letter D, the Department of Trade and Industry with reference to all other basic necessities and prime commodities. Okay, ano pa ba ibang definition of terms dito? Ayan, panic buying is the abnormal phenomenon where consumers buy necessities and prime commodities grossly in excess of their normal requirement, resulting in undue shortages of such goods to the prejudice of the less privileged consumers. So, kasi marami silang pera kaya lahat halos ng available sa market binili. Nangyari yan ngayong COVID, especially around March to April. Person means a natural or juridical person, sabi niya, for the purposes of this act. Prevailing price means the average price at which any basic necessity has been sold in a given time within a month from the occurrence of any of the conditions enumerated under Section 6 of this act. Price ceiling means the maximum price at which any basic necessity or prime commodity may be sold to the general public. And prime commodities, ibig sabihin ito, Prime commodities includes fresh fruits, flour, dried, processed, and canned pork, beef, and poultry meat. Dairy products not falling under basic necessities. Okay. Noodles, onions, garlic, vinegar, patis, soy sauce, toilet soap, fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, poultry and swine and cattle feeds, veterinary products for poultry, swine and cattle, paper, school supplies, nipa shingles, sawali, cement, clinker, GI sheets, hollow blocks, plywood, plyboard, construction nails, batteries, electrical supplies, light bulbs, steel wire, and all drugs not classified as essential drugs by the DOH. Okay, Section 4. Section 4 ng Price Act. Upon petition of the concerned parties and after public hearing, the implementing agency, with the approval of the President, may exclude from the coverage of this Act types or brands of the goods included in the definition of basic necessities and prime commodities, which may be deemed as non-essential goods or luxury goods. So pwede raw yung implementing agency, upon approval of the President, pwede nilang italaga kung ano ba talaga yung mga essential, ano naman yung prime. Pwede nilang i-adjust yun, depende sa sitwasyon. Section 5, illegal acts of price manipulation. Sabi rito, without, dali lang, so nahirapan akong hawakan yan. Without prejudice to the provisions of existing laws on goods not covered by this act, it shall be unlawful for any person habitually engaged in the production, manufacture, importation, storage, transport, distribution, sale, or other methods of disposition of goods to engage in the following acts of price manipulation of the price of any basic necessity. Okay, any basic necessity or prime commodity. Number 1, hoarding. Sabi rito, it is the undue accumulation by a person or combination of persons of any basic commodity beyond his or their normal inventory levels, or the unreasonable limitation or refusal to dispose of, sell, or distribute the stocks of any basic necessity of prime commodity, sabi. Bawal yan, di ba nga may sindikatong gumagawa niyan na iniipit nila yung mga basic commodities or prime commodities, tapos pag inipit nila, ang resulta nun, kokonti ang supply, bababa ang supply, tataas ang demand, magtataas ang presyo. Pag mataas ang presyo, doon nila ibebenta, di ba? Gawaing sindikato yan eh. Okay, sabi pa rito, there shall be prima facie evidence of hoarding when a person has stocks of any basic necessity or prime commodity 50% higher than his usual inventory. Okay? Tapos ayaw niya daw i-dispose o ibenta. Ikalawa, profiteering, which is the sale or offering for sale of any basic necessity or prime commodity at a price grossly in excess of its worth. O, tapos sabi pa rito, binibenta yung basic or prime commodity na walang price tag, misrepresented as to its weight or measurement, is adulterated or diluted. Tapos whenever a person raises the price of any basic or prime commodity, he sells or offers for sale to the general public by more than 10% of its price in the immediately preceding month, sabi. Naku. Pero hindi nga lang daw ito mag-a-apply sa mga agricultural crops, fresh fish, fresh marine products, and other seasonal products. No? Ikatatlo, cartel. Nako, di ba? Naririnig natin lagi, drug cartel. Ito yung sinasabi ko yata na sindikato, which is a combination of or agreement between two or more persons engaged in the production, manufacture, processing, storage, supply, distribution, marketing, sale, or disposition of any basic necessity or prime commodity designed to artificially and unreasonably increase or manipulate its price, sabi niya. There shall be prima facie evidence of engaging in cartel whenever two or more persons or business enterprises competing for the same market and dealing in the same basic necessity or prime commodity perform uniform or complementary acts among themselves which tend to bring out artificial and unreasonable increase in the price of any basic necessity or prime commodity, sabi. Tungo na tayo sa Section 6, automatic price control. Unless otherwise declared by the President, prices of basic necessities in an area shall automatically be frozen at their prevailing prices or placed under automatic price control tuwing or whenever, number 1, the area is proclaimed or declared a disaster area or under a state of calamity. Number 2, that area is declared under an emergency. Number 3, the privilege of writ of habeas corpus is suspended in that area. Number 4, that area is placed under martial law. Number 5, that area is declared to be in a state of rebellion or a state of war is declared in that area. Automatic price freeze yan. Automatic price control daw yan. Ang itatalaga ng presidente dyan. The terms disaster and calamity shall include those brought about by natural or man-made causes, whether foreign or local. Section 7, mandated price ceiling. The President, upon the recommendation, Presidente ng Pilipinas po ito upon the recommendation of the implementing agency or the price coordinating council, may impose a price ceiling on any basic necessity or prime commodity if any of the following conditions so warrants. Number 1, the impendency, existence, or effects of a calamity. Number 2, the threat, existence, or effect of an emergency. Number 3, the prevalence or widespread acts of illegal price manipulations. Number 4, impendency, existence, or effect of any event that causes artificial and unreasonable increase in the price of the basic necessity or prime commodity. And number 5, whenever the prevailing price of any basic necessity or prime commodity has risen to unreasonable levels. Section 8, determination of price ceilings. In determination, the reasonable price ceiling, ito daw yung mga factors that we should take, that may be taken into consideration. Una, the average price in the last 3 months immediately preceding the proclamation of the price ceiling of the basic necessity or prime commodity under consideration. Number 2, the supply available in the market. And number 3, the cost to the producer, manufacturer, distributor, or seller, including but not limited to the exchange rate of the peso to the foreign currency with which a basic necessity or prime commodity or any component, ingredient, or raw material therefore was paid for, and any exchange in the amortization cost of machinery brought about by any change in the exchange rate of the peso to the foreign currency with which the machinery was bought through credit facilities. Any change in the cost of labor brought about by a change in the minimum wage, and any increase in the cost of transporting or distributing the basic necessity or prime commodity to the area of destination. So yun daw, the cost of producer, manufacturer, distributor, or seller, i-determine yan, i-consider yan in determination of price ceilings. Isa pang kasali para i-determine ang price ceiling is such other factors or conditions which will aid in arriving at a just and reasonable price ceiling. Section 9, allocation of a buffer fund to the implementing agency. Okay. Buffer fund, ang pagkakaintindi ko rito is yung parang ang tawag dito, parang pasobra. Ganon, para may pondo sila. So sabi, the implementing agency may procure, purchase, import, or stockpile any basic necessity or prime commodity, devise ways and means of distributing them for sale at reasonable prices in areas where there is shortage of supply or a need to effect changes in its prevailing price. For any or all of these purposes, a buffer fund shall be allocated in the annual appropriations of the implementing agency. So kasali siya sa general appropriations, no? Yan yung ipinapasa ng Office of the President sa Kongreso para aprobahan na budget ng mga ahensya ng pamahalaan. Section 10, powers and responsibilities of implementing agencies. To carry out the intents and purposes of this act, The head of the implementing agency shall have the following additional powers and responsibilities. Okay. Kung maalala natin yung mga nabanggit na agency dito, DOH, Department of Agriculture, di ba? Etc. Sabi rito, he shall, with the approval of the President, promulgate rules, regulations, and procedure for the implementation of this act. Number 2, he shall develop, promulgate, and uh, implement programs, projects, or measures to promote productivity in all basic necessities and prime commodities under his agency's jurisdiction. Number 3, he shall promote and facilitate the establishment of an effective procurement, storage, marketing, and distribution system of basic necessities and prime commodities to ensure their availability in all areas of the country where they are needed. Number 4, during instances of panic buying, he may, with the approval of the President, institute temporary measures to ensure orderly and equitable distribution to consumers of basic necessities and prime commodities in the affected areas, especially sa mga areas na kagaya ngayon as of pagre-record natin ito, di ba, nagdaan ng bagyong Ulysses. Okay, maraming areas na affected. Number 5, from time to time, he may issue suggested reasonable retail prices for any or all basic necessities and prime commodities under his jurisdiction, no? Number 6, he shall cause the immediate dissemination of any mandated price ceiling for any basic or prime commodity under his agency's jurisdiction. Number 7, he may, upon approval of the President and subject to existing laws, rules, and regulations on bidding, enter into any agreement with any local or foreign producer, no, manufacturer, supplier, distributor, or seller for the procurement of supplies of stocks of any basic necessity or prime commodity for purposes of buffer stocking. Letter 8. Number 8. He may, subject to existing laws, rules, and regulations on bidding, enter into any agreement with owners or operators of warehouses or storage houses, or with owners, operators of franchise holders of vehicles or public utilities for the storage, transport, or distribution of any basic necessity or prime commodity. Number 9, he may conduct investigations of any violations in any violation of this act after due notice and hearing. Pwede rin siya mag-impose ng administrative fines in such amount as he may deem reasonable, which shall in no case be less than 1,000 pesos nor more than 1 million. Okay, in the imposition of administrative fines, the following factors shall be taken into consideration. Titignan whether the subject of the violation is a basic necessity or a prime commodity, at kung violation ba nito involves basic necessities, mas serious ang pataw dito. Isa pang consideration na titignan whether the subject of the violation is under price control under Section 6 and 7 of this Act. Violations involving basic necessities and prime commodities under price control shall be deemed more serious, di ba? Ang sabi niya, pag basic commodities, more serious. Pag violations naman ng anong tawag dito? Ng commodities under price control, mas serious din yun. Titignan din yung number of violations committed, di ba? Kung nakailang beses mo nang ginagawa to, mas mataas ang fine. At panghuli, such other considerations as may be deemed necessary to carry out the intents, purposes, and provisions of this act. So yun ang mga basihan ng head of the implementing agency para kasuhan, administratibo, pagmultahin yung mga nagva-violate dito sa PriceAct. Number 10, kapangyarihan din nila. Okay? The head of the agency may acquire the attendance and testimony of witnesses or the production of goods, objects, books, papers, documents, contracts, records, financial statements, accounts, agreements, and such other evidences, material in the determination of any violation of this act. Kapangyarihan din nila, sabi rito, number 11. Dami nilang powers, without prejudice to the power to issue temporary closure or temporary restraining order for a period which shall not be more than 10 days. He may, after due notice and hearing, issue cease and desist orders, reprimand, censure, suspend, revoke, or cancel any permit, license, authority, or registration issued by his office, or order the permanent closure of any establishment violating the provisions of this act. Number 12, he may initiate summary proceedings daw to cause the seizure by the government of basic necessities and prime commodities subject of a violation of this act and order their sale to the public at reasonable prices whenever the nature of or the demand for such goods so requires, provided that pending litigation and process of the sale shall be held in trust or escrow by the implementing agency. May kapangyarihan sila parang korte, no? ng summary proceedings, kunin yung mga subject commodities in question, no? At pwede nila itong iutos na ipagbenta sa publiko at reasonable prices. Provided further that should the owner of the basic necessity or prime commodity seized and sold be found not liable for the violation, okay? Kung after ng hearing na ibenta na ng agency yung mga produkto niya, napag-alaman na hindi naman pala siya liable sa violation, yung process of the sale shall be paid to him naman. Sabi pa rito, yung head raw of the implementing agency shall cause the broadcast in radio or television and the publication in at least 2 newspapers of general circulation of the fact of sale or disposition of such seized goods at least 3 days before the date of sale or disposition. Number 13, nakapangyarihan niya, he may, at powers pa rin ito ng head ng implementing agency. He may initiate action and cause the prosecution before the proper court of law of violations of this act. Number 14, he may deputize and enlist the assistance of any government official or agency in carrying out the provisions of this act. And number 15, such other functions and ancillary powers as may be necessary to effectively implement this act. Haba rin pala nito, no? The PriceAct. Section 11, Price Coordinating Council. There is hereby created a Price Coordinating Council, hereinafter referred to as the Council, to be composed of. Sino-sino bang mga members ng council na to? Price Coordinating Council. Sabi ito, the Secretary of Trade and Industry as Chairman, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Health, Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources, DILG, Secretary of Local Government, Secretary of Transportation and Communications, the Secretary of Justice, Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority, NEDA, no? Isang representative from the consumer sector, isang representative from the agricultural producers sector, one representative from the trading sector, and one representative from the manufacturers sector. The sectoral representatives of the Price Coordinating Council shall be appointed by the President for a term of 1 year without prejudice to reappointment for another term. The Council shall meet every quarter and whenever the President or the Chairman shall convene the same. Each member shall receive reasonable reimbursements for transportation. Members from the government sector may designate a representative to the Council. The Department of Trade and Industry shall provide a secretary to the Council from its existing organizational structure. Section 12, Functions of the Price Coordinating Council. Number 1, it shall coordinate the productivity, distribution, and price stabilization programs, project, and measures of the government and develop comprehensive strategies to effect a general stabilization of prices of basic necessities and prime commodities at affordable levels. Ikalawa, it shall report to the President and to the Congress of the Philippines the status and progress of the programs, projects, and measures undertaken by each implementing department, agency, or office, as well as the comprehensive strategies developed by the Council to stabilize the prices of basic necessities and prime commodities. Ikatatlo, it shall advise the President on general policy matters for promotion and improvement in productivity, distribution, and stabilization of prices of basic necessities and prime commodities. Ika-4, sabi niya, it may require from its members or any government agency such information as it may deem necessary and conduct public hearings for purposes of assessing the supply, distribution, and price situation of any basic necessity or prime commodity. Number 5, it shall publicize from time to time developments in productivity, supply, distribution, and prices of basic necessities and prime commodities. Siguro papatawag sila ng media, no? Presscon. And number 6, whenever automatic price control of basic necessities is imposed under Section 6 of this Act, it shall cause the immediate dissemination of their prevailing prices or the price ceilings imposed in lieu thereof, as the case may be, through publication in a newspaper of general circulation in the area affected and through broadcast by radio, and whenever the same is deemed to materially make dissemination of information more effective by television. Siguro pwede na rin sa social media ngayon, ano? Okay, Section 13, the Price Action Officer, powers and functions. So, whenever the President deems it necessary, he may appoint any of the members of the Price Coordinating Council, kahit sino doon sa mga nabanggit natin, as Price Action Officer for the duration of the automatic price control under Section 6 of this Act, who shall have the following powers and functions. Ito naman yung kapangyarihan ni Price Action Officer. Pero kung kailan lang gusto o kung kailan lang tingin ng Pangulo kailangan mag-appoint, doon lang magkakaroon ng Price Action Officer. Number 1, he shall carry out, implement, and enforce the policies and decisions of the Council. Number 2, he shall coordinate the actions of all implementing agencies involved in the monitoring and investigation of abnormal price movements and shortages of basic necessities and prime commodities. Number 3, he may call upon any official, agent, employee, agency, or instrumentality of the national or local government for any other assistance that he may deem necessary to carry out the purposes of this Act. Number 4, he shall establish linkage and coordinate with non-government or private organizations in the affected are to assist in the monitoring and implementation of price control therein. And number 5, he shall exercise such other functions and duties as may be given to him by the President. Paano kaya pag sinabi ni President, timpla mo ang kape, ay masayihin mo ko? Hindi naman siguro kasali yan, no? Kasi ano naman yan eh, hindi naman kasali sa function ng isang Price Action Officer. Okay, Section 14. Ano naman ang role ng National Statistics Office? They shall conduct independent periodic surveys and studies of the selling prices of all basic necessities and prime commodities all over the country, as well as their share or effect on the family income of the different economic groups, okay, in the country for purpose of serving as database for government efforts to stabilize prices as well as for evaluation. Section 15, penalty for acts of illegal price manipulation. So, ang penalty daw niyan ay imprisonment for a period of not less than 5 years nor more than 15 years and shall be imposed a fine of not less than 5,000 pesos nor more than 2 million pesos. Grabe naman, no? Nagpa-price manipulation ka, nagsisindikato ka, nahuli ka, paano kung tinalaga sa'yo, makulong ka ng 15 years? Diba? Not more than 15 years, sinagad ka. 15 years and 2 million pesos, sus Mariosep, diba? Dahil sa yung price manipulation nakakasira ng ekonomiya yan. At nawawala na access yung mga ordinaryong tao sa basic services. Kaya masama yan eh. Section 16, penalty naman for violation of price ceiling. Imprisonment daw for a period of not less than 1 year nor more than 10 years. Sus, matagal din. And a fine of not less than 5,000 nor more than 1 million or both at the discretion of the court. Sus, Mariosep. Section 17, violation by juridical persons. O kunwari daw, nag-violate sila. They shall be held liable. Kung foreign corporation naman, yung representative mo rito shall be held responsible. Section 18, violation by aliens. Sabi rito, pag violate nila yung Section 15 and 16 of this Act, the offender shall, upon conviction and after service of sentence, be immediately deported. Wala na daw deportation proceedings. Deported ka na. Section 19, violation by government officials or employees. Sabi rito, nakipagsabuatan siya, magiging principally responsible din siya for the violation and shall suffer the additional penalty of permanent disqualification to hold public office. Section 20, criminal penalties without prejudice to administrative sanctions. Sabi rito, yung mga criminal penalties daw ay wala namang prejudice o hindi naman niya mahaharangan yung further filing of administrative sanctions with the proper implementing agency, di ba? Section 21, relations of the PriceAct to other laws and issuances. Okay, ito daw act na ito ay alinsunod naman sa kahit na anumang issuances, hindi siya magiging sagabal, no? Okay, Section 22, separability clause. Yun, sinasabi lang naman lagi, pag separability clause sa batas, kung merong provision na dineklarang unconstitutional, yung provision lang na yun, hindi naman as to the whole law. Okay? Marami na siyang nirepeal na batas. Okay. So, doon nagtatapos yung ating Price Act, no? Magpapahinga lang ako sandali at magbabalik tayo para naman basahin natin ang anti-dumping. Teka, hanapin ko muna yung anti-dumping na yan. Basa. Anti-dumping. Naku, mahaba-haba rin, Sus Maria Josep. Mahabang basahan. Pero interesting to. Anti-dumping. Sige, ako yung magbabalik. Parang dalawa nga may tulo eh. Minsan sa pagkaka-seal din. Okay, basahin naman natin tong okay, Anti-Dumping Act of 1994. Ito yung Republic Act 7845, an act rationalizing and strengthening the provisions of anti-dumping, amending for the purpose section 301. Tapos sa Part 2, Title 2, Book 1 of the Tariff and Customs Code of the Philippines as amendment. Anti-Dumping Act of 1994. Section 2, it is hereby declared the policy of the state to protect Filipino enterprises against unfair foreign competition and trade practices, sabi niya. Section 301, Part 2, Title 2, Book 1 of the Tariff and Customs Code of the Philippines as amendment is hereby further amended to read as follows. Okay. Part 2, Special Duties. Okay, inamyenda niya yung Section 301, yung dumping duty. Letter A, whenever the Secretary of Finance or Secretary of Trade and Industry receives an anti-dumping petition from the domestic industry or the Secretary has reason to believe from any invoice or other document or newspaper, magazine, or information, sabi niya, that a specific kind or class of foreign article is being imported into or sold or is likely to be sold in the Philippines at a price less than its normal value. Tapos yung importation or sale na magaganap might injure or retard the establishment and likely to injure an industry. The Secretary shall, within 20 days from receipt of such petition or information, determine a prima facie case of dumping. Okay, yun ang sinasabi rito eh. Yun ang sinasabi niya dun sa dumping na ito. So anong pwedeng example dito? Siguro yung mga naisip ko yung mga China products, you know? The Commission, upon receipt of the advice from the Secretary, shall conduct an investigation to, sabi niya ganyan. Dami palang trabaho ng Secretary of Trade and Industry. No? Ito, pag nakatanggap daw siya ng advice, the commission, ibang commission tong sinasabi niya, customs, kapag naka-receive siya ng advice, tariff commission, pag naka-receive ng advice yung tariff commission from the Secretary of Trade, gagawa siya ng investigation to, number 1, verify if the kind of class or article in question is being imported into or sold or is likely to be sold in the Philippines at a price less than its normal value. Yung normal value daw of an article shall be the comparable price in the ordinary course of trade for the like articles when destined for domestic consumption in the exporting country, which for the purposes of this section means the country of production or manufacture. Pwede rin siguro yung mga dito, no? Yung mga second-hand na articles and items na binibenta from abroad, tapos binibenta rito. Meron silang napaparalisa ng industriya, no? Diba? Mahirap din. Trabaho rin ng Tariff Commission to ascertain the difference kung meron man between the export price and the normal value of the article. Number 3, determine if as a result thereof, a domestic industry producing like articles in the Philippines suffers or will be threatened with injury or will suffer material retardation in the establishment of a domestic industry in the Philippines. Okay, no? So, pangatlo, okay, sabi rito, uh, iti-take into consideration daw yung mga factors such as rate of increase of importation of such articles. Kasali yon sa determination of potential injury. Kasi dapat daw merong at least 3% increase in the volume of importation of such articles being dumped relative to the average monthly volume of importation of such like articles for the immediately preceding 3 months, or reasonable likelihood of increased importations or freely disposables or increased capacity of the exporter of such imported articles, or import prices which will have a significant depressing or suppressing effect on domestic prices, no? Okay, bakit parang hindi naman nasusunod ito, ano? Ang daming China products na nakakasama sa industriya, o kaya shoes, no? Yung mga imitation shoes na nakakapatay sa industriya natin, kagaya ng shoe industry sa Marikina, hindi ba? Okay. Letter I, trabaho rin daw ito ng ano, ng tariff commission. Sandali. Whether or not the imported articles under consideration are identical or alike in all respect to articles produced by the domestic industry or substantially of the same material, or although of different composition or material, serves the same or similar purpose, such as a substitute as the articles produced in the Philippines in quantities sufficient to supply at least 10% of local consumption for the immediately preceding 3 months prior to the filing of the dumping protest. Okay. Hindi pala letter I ito, kundi nalito na ako sa dami ng mga letter D, tapos may mga magkakasunod na provision. Okay. The volume of dumped imports and their effects on prices in the domestic market for like articles, sabi nga yan, ang gulay, magulo yung pagkakabalangkas niya eh. Provided that the Commission shall determine the consequent impact of these imports on domestic producers by considering relevant economic factors and indicators. So, titignan nila, gaano ba katindi ang impact nitong mga ini-import natin na ito sa domestic producers natin. So, ano yung factors na titignan? Letter A, 5% decline in sales volume or decline in sales prices of at least 2% as compared to the average monthly sales for the immediately preceding 3 months. Letter B, 5% decline in the volume of production as compared to the average monthly volume of production for the immediately preceding 3 months. Or letter C, actual and potential negative effects on employment and inventories of the subject articles. Within 5 days from the receipt of the advice of the Secretary of Trade, sorry. Within 5 days from the receipt of the advice from the Secretary of Finance, the Tariff Commission shall identify all parties concerned and require them to submit their respective memoranda within 15 days from notice. Letter C, the Commission shall terminate its investigation within 90 days. Parang sa korte rin, di ba? Parang similar. Pag submitted for decision na isang case, 90 days para desisyonan, ano? I-determinate nila investigation within 90 days from receipt of the aforesaid advice and shall submit its findings to the Special Committee of Anti-Dumping, herein referred to as Special Committee. Okay? So may ganun pala, no? Within 60 days from the termination of its investigation. So after magtapos, no? Doon sa within 90-day period, upon the advice of the Secretary, nag-imbestiga sila within 90 days, nag-terminate yun. After ma-terminate nun, magpapasa sila ng kanilang findings within 60 days. Okay? Papasa yung findings nila ng Tariff Commission sa Special Committee on Anti-Dumping. Okay, provided that the Commission shall give notice to interested parties of such findings submitted to the Special Committee. Okay. In case any or all the parties on record fail to submit their respective memoranda within the period prescribed, the Commission shall base its findings on the best available evidence. The Commission shall motu proprio terminate its investigation if the provisionally estimated margin of dumping is less than 2% of export price or the value or export price or the volume of dumped imports is negligible. Sabi niya, no? The volume of dumped imports is considered negligible if the volume of dumped imports from a particular country accounts for less than 3% of the average monthly imports of the like articles in the Philippines, unless countries which individually account for less than 3% of the average monthly imports of the like articles in the Philippines collectively account for more than 7% of total average monthly imports of that article. So pag 2%, less than 2% yung dumping margin, i-determinate na raw ng commission yung kanilang investigasyon. Pero kung ang volume of dump imports ay accounts for 3% of average monthly imports of similar articles, no? Ituturing itong negligible. Letter D, the special committee shall within 15 days after receipt of the report of the Commission decide whether the article in question is being imported in violation of this section and shall give due notice of such decision. Okay. Letter E, the dumping duty as provided for in subsection D hereof, the dumping duty shall be equal to the difference between the actual export price and the normal value actually existing at the time of importation as determined by the Commission from the supporting documents submitted or from other reliable sources. Letter F, pending investigation and final decision of the case. Okay, pag habang pending pa, the article in question and articles of the same specific kind or class na in-import nila under similar circumstances shall be released to the owner, importer, consignee, or agent upon the giving of a cash bond. Okay. Letter G, for purposes of this section, the parties concerned, including the protestant, okay, shall be afforded consultations with the Commission and the Secretary and shall avail of any technical information and data, data yun data, necessary to sustain its case. Okay. So, balikan lang natin ang sinasabi rito habang wala pa namang desisyon, yung appropriate agency, no? Yung special, ano sabi niya rito? Special committee, wala pa namang desisyon. Pwede namang i-release yung mga articles, yung items in question, doon sa kanyang consignee, owner, or agent, kung sila ay magbibigay ng bond. Okay? Parang security yun eh. Okay. Punta na tayo sa letter H. Any interested party of record who is dissatisfied with a decision in a dumping protest may file a motion for reconsideration with the special committee within 30 days from notice of such decision, provided that no motion for extension of time to file a motion for reconsideration under this subsection shall be allowed. So magpa-file ka, mag-aapila ka, doon pa rin sa special committee within 30 days. Magmo-motion for reconsideration ka pero bawal daw yung motion for extension of time to file a motion for reconsideration. Letter I, any aggrieved party may appeal only the amount of the dumping duty to the Court of Tax Appeals. Okay? In the same manner and within the same period as provided for by law in the case of appeal from a decision of the Commissioner of Customs. Similar yun, no? The findings of fact in a dumping case shall be final and conclusive. Letter J. Okay, yung letter J ay nahati sa dalawa. Number 1, the article, if it has not been previously released under cash bonds, shall be released after payment of the party concerned of the corresponding dumping duty, in addition to any ordinary duties, taxes, and charges kung meron man, or re-exported by the owner, importer, consignee, or agent at his option and expense upon the filing of a cash bond in an amount not less than the provisionally estimated difference between the actual export price and the normal value plus the applicable regular duty conditioned upon presentation of landing certificate issued by a consular officer of the Philippines at the country of destination, or di naman kaya, ito yung ikalawa, If the article has been previously released under cash bond, sabi, the party concerned shall be required to pay the corresponding dumping duty in addition to any ordinary duties, taxes, and charges kung meron man. Ang hirap din maging importer. Ang hirap din maging exporter. Pero parang mas maluwag ang batas natin sa pag-export, no? Kaysa yung mag-i-import. Mahirap. Lalo na gaya nga ng sinasabi ko, every importation kahit for personal use, may buwis. Letter K, any investigation to be conducted by the Commission under this section shall include a public hearing or hearings where the owner, importer, consignee, or agent of the imported article, the local producers or manufacturers, yan sila yung apektado and other parties directly affected shall be given an opportunity to be heard and to present evidence, no, bearing on the subject matter. Letter L, the established dumping duty shall be subject to adjustment based on whichever is higher of the prevailing normal values as defined in paragraph B1. Okay, the Commission shall conduct quarterly examination and or verification of the normal value to sustain the necessity of a judgment. Okay. Should the special committee, upon receipt of report of the Commission, find that there is a need for an adjustment after public hearing, it shall advise the Commissioner of Customs so that he may effect the necessary adjustment in dumping duty. Kaya ang daming corruption ng customs ang salimuot nila Ang daming batas na pinapatupad nila at napakahirap. Meron pa rito, the Philippine Finance Attaché, or in the absence thereof, the Commercial Attaché or Trade Attaché, okay, or the diplomatic officer or consular officer abroad shall be advised by the special committee of any article covered by dumping decision. Letter M, whenever the Commission on its own motion or upon application of any interested party finds matapos na yung hearing that that any of the conditions which necessitated the imposition of the dumping duty has ceased to exist. Okay, wala ka ng cause of action, kumbaga. You shall submit the necessary recommendation to the special committee for the discontinuance or modification of such dumping duty and shall so advise the Commissioner of Customs. Yung decision nila daw shall be published in the official gazette or in a newspaper of general circulation. Letter N, any dumping decision promulgated by the special committee shall be effective for a period of 5 years from the time of its promulgation, except upon the representation of the interested party of the necessity to continue the implementation of said decision, in which case, yung special committee shall advise the Commission to conduct an investigation. Parang ang pinaka-boss dito yung special committee. Ang i-investiga yung Tariff Commission, no? Upon the advice nga of the Trade Secretary, whether any of the conditions in paragraphs B1 and B3 still exists. The action for extension shall be brought before the special committee at least 6 months before the expiration of the period. The findings of the Commission shall be submitted to the special committee at least 3 months before the expiration of the period, but in no case shall it exceed 1 month after receipt of the advice from the special committee. Okay, the period of extension shall in no case exceed 24 months or 2 years. Okay, for the purposes of this section daw, tignan natin, comparable price shall mean the domestic price in the exporting country at the same level of trade which is sold or offered for sale at wholesale at the date of exportation to the Philippines. Cost of production of an imported article shall be the sum of. Ito yung ibig sabihin ng cost of production. The sum of, letter A, the cost of materials for fabrication, yan, lahat. Actual administrative, selling and general expenses, at least 10% of production costs incurred by the exporter or producer. The cost of all containers and coverings and other costs, charges, expenses, incident to placing, yan. Okay, but not less than 1% of production costs. And letter D, a reasonable amount for profit, not less than 8% of the sum of the amounts referred to in the preceding subparagraphs B and C. Okay. Ikatlo, domestic industry shall refer to the domestic producers of like, ibig sabihin yung kaparehong articles Export price of an imported article shall be the price at which such article has been purchased or agreed to be purchased prior to the time of exportation. Okay. Any additional like article, ibig sabihin niya yun nga pinaliwanag ko na kaparehong produkto. A special committee on anti-dumping is hereby created. Ayan. To decide whether the article in question is being imported in violation of this act. Okay. It shall be composed of 3 members, yung Secretary of Finance as chairman, Secretary of Trade and Industry, and either the Secretary of Agriculture, kung agriculture yung agricultural product yung in question, or Secretary of Labor kung non-agricultural product. So ano to, magkakatulong ang mga ahensya dito. Chairman si Secretary of Finance, no? Siya yung special committee. Secretary of Finance, siya yung chairman. Kasama niya si Secretary of Trade and Industry, at kasama niya si Secretary of Agriculture and Secretary of Labor, as the case may be. Sabi nga, no? Tapos inuutusan nila yung Tariff Commission under the Bureau of Customs, no? The Secretary of Finance, in consultation with the Special Committee on Anti-Dumping, and the Commission shall promulgate all rules and regulations necessary to carry out their respective functions under this section. So doon po nagtatapos, no, itong ating anti-dumping law. Interesting din siya, no? Anti-Dumping Act, no? Anti-Dumping Act. Okay, subukan naman nating pasadahan itong pasadahan natin itong Republic Act number 8289, Magna Carta for small businesses. Okay. Sabi rito, small and medium enterprise shall be defined as any business activity or enterprise engaged in industry, agribusiness, and their services, whether single proprietorship, cooperative, partnership, or corporation, whose total assets, inclusive of those arising from loans, but exclusive of the land on which a particular business entity's office, plant, and equipment are situated, must have value falling under the category. So, pag sinabi niyang micro, okay, less than 1,500,001. Pag sinabing small, between pag sinabing micro business, ang maximum niya ay 1,500,001 at pababa. Pag sinabi namang small, 15 million pababa sa 1,500,001. Sinabi namang medium enterprise, maximum niya ay 60 million pababa sa 15 million and 1. Yun ang sinasabi niya, no? Okay. The above definition shall be subject to review and adjustment by said council motu proprio or upon recommendation of sectoral organizations, taking into account inflation and other economic indicators. Okay. The council may use as variables the number of employees, equity, capital, and asset size. Okay, ano naman yung gusto sabihin ng batas na ito? Okay. Parang guideline lang siya sa business, ano? So, pasadahan natin. Ano pa? Sabi niya, eligibility for government assistance. To qualify for assistance, counseling, incentives, and promotion under this act, business falling under the above definition must be. Ito, para mag-qualify kayo, kung gusto na, sa government assistance. Letter A, duly registered with appropriate agencies as presently provided by law, provided that in case of micro-enterprises as defined herein, registration with the Office of the Municipal or City Treasurer shall be deemed sufficient compliance with this requirement. So, parehistro ka sa Municipal or City Treasurer. Letter B, 100% owned and capitalized by Filipino citizens if single proprietorship or partnership. If the enterprise is a juridical entity o kaya isa siyang korporasyon, at least 60% of its capital or outstanding stocks must be owned by Filipino citizens. Alinsunod naman ito sa Constitution, di ba? Letter C, a business activity within the major sectors of economy. Okay, yan yung mga industry, services, practice of profession, the operation of tourism-related establishments and agribusiness. Okay, which for purposes of this act refers to any business activity involving the manufacturing, processing, and or production of agricultural produce, excluding farm-level agriculture or crop production. And letter D naman, it must not be a branch, subsidiary, or division of a large-scale enterprise, nor may its policies be determined by a large-scale enterprise or by persons who are not owners or employees of the enterprise. Yun ang sabi niya. So, yun lang siya, no? So, ang tanong ko lang, kung ikaw kaya ay mga grupo kayo ng lawyers, pwede kaya kayong humingi ng government assistance? Kasi nabanggit dito yung practice of profession, di ba? Okay. However, this requirement shall not preclude a small and medium enterprise from accepting subcontracts from large enterprise. So, pwede naman pala, pwede silang tumanggap ng subcontracts from large enterprise. Ang sinasabi lang dito, yung nabanggit natin, apat, para makahingi ka ng government assistance. Hindi ka dapat na parang branch ka lamang o subsidiary o division ka ng malaking kumpanya naman. Registered small enterprises shall be entitled to a share of at least 10% of total procurement value of goods and services supplied to the government, its bureaus, offices, and agencies annually. Okay. Section 5, Guiding Principles to set the pace for small and medium enterprise. Okay, sa kanilang development, no? Para iset natin yung pace ng kanilang development, the state shall be guided by the following principles. Letter A, minimal set of rules and simplification of procedures and requirements. All government agencies having to do with small enterprises shall pursue stability of rules and to encourage entrepreneurial spirit among the citizenry. Letter B, in order to hasten growth and expansion of small and medium enterprises, the private sector throughout the country shall be encouraged to assist in the effective implementation of this act by participating in government programs for small and medium enterprises strictly in accordance with the law and consistent with the attainment of purposes hereof. Isang example siguro dyan, yung mga go negosyo projects, no, or programs. Kung narinig nyo na yun, no? Letter C, coordination of government efforts. Government efforts shall be coordinated to achieve coherence in objectives. All appropriate offices, particularly those under the DTI, Department of Trade, Finance, Budget and Management, Agriculture, Agrarian Reform, DNR, Labor and Employment, Transportation, Communication, Public Works and Highways, Science and Technology, Local Government and Tourism, as well as NEDA, yung National Economic and Development Authority, and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, no, shall, to the best of their effort and in coordination with local government units, provide the necessary support and assistance to small and medium enterprises. Yung bangko, gagawa nila yan sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng loans, di ba? Letter D, decentralization. The state shall accelerate the decentralization process by establishing regional and provincial offices in order to enhance and attain greater efficiency in the provision of services to the countryside and the implementation of this act in coordination with local government units. Ito medyo kulang pa to in decentralization. Kaya traffic pa rin ng Maynila. Marami masyadong mga kailangang agencies like SEC. Wala namang SEC sa ibang regions. Magpaparehistro ka ng korporasyon, pupunta kang SEC Manila. Magtatrabaho ka kunwari na lang sa isang kunwari Philippine Navy, pupunta ka pa sa Fort Bonifacio, kaya ang place of assignment mo naman Zambales. So kulang pa rin ang buong Pilipinas sa decentralization. May mga bagay na hindi ka na dapat pumunta pa ng alam mo 'yon? Okay, BSP, kung bangko ka kunwari na nasa Region 3, sana man lang merong BSP sa Pampanga. Di mo na kailangan pumunta ng, di ba, ganun yung kulang natin. Okay, Section 4. Okay, inamyendahan niya yung Section 6 of Republic Act number 677 na sabi niya, to effectively spur the growth and development of small and medium enterprises throughout the country and to carry out the policy declared in this act. A small and medium enterprise development council is hereby created. The council shall be attached to the Department of Trade and Industry and shall be constituted within 60 days after the approval of this act. Okay, so meron na tayo ngayon na Small and Medium Enterprise Development Council attached to the Department of Trade and Industry. Ang trabaho ng council na yon, siya yung primary agency responsible for the promotion, growth, and development of small and medium enterprises in the country by way of facilitating and closely coordinating national efforts to promote the viability and growth of small and medium enterprises, including assisting relevant agencies in the tapping of local and foreign funds for small and medium enterprise development, as well as promoting the use of existing programs, as well as seeking ways to maximize the use of our labor resources. So yung Section 5 nitong MagnaCarta for Small Enterprise, inamyendahan niya yung Section 7 ng RA 677. Sabi rito, the council shall be headed by the Secretary of Trade and Industry as chairman, okay, and may elect from among themselves a vice chairman to preside over the council meetings in the absence of the chairman. The members shall be Director General of the NEDA, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Labor and Employment, Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources, Secretary of Science and Technology, Secretary of Tourism, the Chairman of the Monetary Board, Chairman of Small Business Guarantee and Finance Corporation, Chairman of the Small Medium Enterprises Promotion, which the President, promotion body, ulitin natin, Chairman of the Small Medium Enterprises Promotion Body, which the President shall undertake to establish under this Act. 3 representatives from the private sector at large, all Filipino citizens to represent Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and 1 representative from small and medium enterprises sector to be appointed by the President, and letter K, a representative from the private banking sector to serve alternately among the Chamber of Thrift Bank, the Rural Bankers Association of the Philippines, yung RBAP, Rural Bankers Association of the Philippines, RBAP, and the Bankers Association of the Philippines. Oh, so pag member ka ng BAP, kasali kayo, binubuo nyo itong ano na to, itong Small and Medium Enterprise Development Council. Ay, maganda ito Okay. Okay. So, at least may idea na tayo, no, about the Magna Carta for Small Enterprise. Ano pa ba yung mga pwede nating maliliit na basa-basahin dito? Sandali, tingnan natin. Ano yan? Anniversary. Yan natin to. Ano naman to? Ito. Basahin lang natin maikli lang. Republic Act 8366. An act liberalizing the Philippine Investment House industry, amending certain sections of PD number 129 as amended, otherwise known as the Investment Houses Law. So, pag binabasa natin yung declaration policy, dun kasi nakaangkla yung batas. Yun yung parang pinaka-duty ng Estado sa kanyang citizens kung bakit siya gumawa ng ganitong batas. Sabi rito, it is the policy of the state to expand and strengthen the capital base of the economy in order to ensure sustained economic growth and development. Towards this end, the Philippine Investment House industry is hereby liberalized, increasing foreign equity participation and raising the minimum capitalization of investment houses to enable them to meet the present and future demands of the market. Parang nakinabang ang mga Villar dito, di ba? Di kaya? Okay. So, inaamyendahan nito yung Section 5 of PD 129 as follows. So, pagdating sa citizenship requirements. So, sabi niya rito, at least 40% of the voting stock of any investment house shall be owned by citizens of the Philippines. So 40% na lang, no? In determining the percentage of foreign-owned voting stocks in investment houses, the basis for the computation shall be the citizenship of each stockholder, and if the stockholder is a corporation, the citizenship of the individual stockholders holding voting shares in that corporation. In approving foreign equity applications to investment houses, the SEC shall approve such applications only if the same or similar rights are enjoyed by Philippine nationals in the applicant's country. So 40% na lamang of the voting stock ang nire-require na pag-aari ng Philippines. Siguro dati ito 60 or high, basta higher than 40. Sabi rito, foreign nationals may become members of the board of directors to the extent of the foreign participation in the equity of said enterprises. So inaamendahan niya rito yung Section 8 of the same decree. Sabi rito, yung Section 8 capital requirements, in the case of newly organized investment houses, the minimum paid-in capital shall be 300 million pesos. Yun yung minimum, no? The minimum paid-in capital of the existing investment houses shall be 300 million to be built up in 2 years, okay, after the effectivity of this act in the following manner, okay. So, kailangan ang minimum paid-up capital mo, yung nabayaran mo ng capital, shall be 300 million. Ito siguro yung nakalagay sa bangko as evidence, no, of your capitalization. Tapos, 200 million daw, and an additional 50 million for every year thereafter until the minimum capitalization is attained. Ganon-ganon ang pagkaka-setup niya. So, okay. Okay. The Monetary Board may prescribe a higher minimum capitalization in order to promote and ensure the stability of the Philippine capital market and the competitiveness of the investment house industry in line with the national economic goals. The Monetary Board shall, within 6 months, prescribe a risk assets to capital ratio and other capital adequacy ratios in order to provide broader protection to the investing public. So si Monetary Board, mabigat ha. Within 6 months, matapos na maaprubahan itong batas na ito o mag-take effect, siya magpe-prescribe ng risk assets to capital ratio and other capital adequacy ratios. So siya magtatakda kung ano yung masasabing capital adequacy, yung sapat na kapital. Pag bumaba ka doon, questionable ka. So yun po itong an act liberalizing the Philippine Investment House. So pwede pa lang, so 40% na lang pa lang required na pag-aari ng Pilipino pagdating sa housing. Okay, maghanap pa tayo. Baka may mabasa pa tayo. Ano ba ito? Tingnan natin to. Baka may maikli pa rito. May kinalaman pa rin naman lahat ito sa commercial law eh. O, ito mahaba-haba. Pero maikli lang din naman. Basahin na rin natin tong Republic Act number 8762. An act liberalizing the retail trade business. Tapos repealing for the purpose RA 1180 as amended and for other purposes. Sabi rito sa Retail Trade Liberalization Act, no? Sabi niya, it is a policy of the state to promote consumer welfare in attracting, promoting, and welcoming productive investments that will bring down prices for the Filipino consumer, create more jobs, promote tourism, assist small manufacturers, stimulate economic growth, and enable Philippine goods and services to become globally competitive through the liberalization of the retail trade sector. Pursuant to this policy, the Philippine retail trade industry is hereby liberalized to encourage Philippine and foreign investors to forge an efficient and competitive retail trade sector in the interest of empowering the Filipino consumer through lower prices, higher quality of goods, better services, and wider choices. Section 3, definition of terms. Retail trade shall mean any act, occupation, or calling of habitually selling direct to the general public merchandise, commodities, or goods for consumption, but the restriction of this law shall not apply to the following. Hindi kasali dito yung sales by a manufacturer, processor, laborer, or worker to the general public of the products manufactured, processed, or produced by him if his capital does not exceed 100,000 pesos. Hindi siya kasali doon. Mas mababa sa 100,000 pesos ang kanyang kapital. Sales by a farmer or agriculturist selling the products of his farm. Letter C, sales in restaurant operations by a hotel owner or innkeeper irrespective of the amount of capital, provided that the restaurant is incidental to the hotel business. And letter D, sales which are limited only to products manufactured, processed, or assembled by a manufacturer through a single outlet, irrespective of capitalization. Okay, retail trade, no? Okay, so pag mas mataas ng 100,000 pesos ang capitalization mo at hindi naman incidental yung sales mo o hindi ka naman single outlet o hindi ka naman farmer, ikaw ay maituturing na retail trade. High-end or luxury goods shall refer to goods which are not necessary for life maintenance and whose demand is generated in large part by the highest income groups. Okay, ito. Sila Willie Revillame lang ito. Chris Aquino. Luxury goods shall include but are not limited to products such as jewelry, branded or designer clothing and footwear, wearing apparel, leisure and sporting goods, electronics, and other personal effects. So, kasali dito sila Jinky Pacquiao, Derek Ramsey, yan, mga heart evangelista, yan, high-end or luxury goods. Ha? Section 4, treatment of natural-born citizen who has lost his Philippine citizenship. A natural-born citizen of the Philippines who has lost his Philippine citizenship but who resides in the Philippines shall be granted the same rights as Filipino citizens for purposes of this act. Section 5. Foreign-owned partnerships, associations, and corporations formed and organized under the laws of the Philippines may, upon registration with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the DTI, or in case of foreign-owned single proprietorships with the Department of Trade and Industry, pwede silang mag-engage or invest in the retail trade business dito sa Pilipinas, ha? Okay, subject to the following categories. Category A, enterprises with paid-up capital of the equivalent in Philippine pesos of less than 2,500,000 US dollars shall be reserved exclusively for Filipino citizens and corporations wholly owned by Filipino citizens. Kapag mas mababa sa 2.5 million dollars ang capitalization, reserved yon sa Filipino citizens. Mas mababa, ulitin ko, mas mababa sa 2.5 million US dollars. Category B naman, enterprises with a minimum paid-up capital of the equivalent of 2.5 million dollars may be wholly owned by foreigners except for the first 2 years after the effectivity of this act, wherein foreign participation shall be limited to not more than 60% of total equity. Pero pwede na rin daw sila mag-fully owned, okay? So, ano lang foreign-owned na association, corporations, partnerships formed under the Philippine laws ang sinasabi rito. At yun namang foreign-owned single proprietorships na nakarehistro sa DTI, no? Punta tayo sa category C, enterprises with a paid-up capital of the equivalent Philippine pesos of 7.5 million dollars or more may be wholly owned by foreigners. So mas malaki ang capitalization requirement nila. So pwede na raw nilang pagka ang capitalization, ulitin natin, pag ang halaga ay 2.5 million dollars na capitalization pababa, reserved din sa Filipinos. Pwede rin naman daw 2.5 million dollars na capitalizations may be wholly owned by foreigners after the first 2 years after the effectivity of this code, and limited pa rin siya sa 60% of total equity. 60% ang pag-aari ng foreigner. Category C naman, $7.5 million ang paid up capital, no? Yung capitalization nila shall be wholly owned o pwedeng magmay-ari ang mga foreigners, provided, sabi rito, that in no case shall the investments for establishing a store in categories B and C be less than the equivalent in Philippine pesos of $830,000. Okay. So dapat yung investment nila doon sa ilalagay nilang store dito ay katumbas ng $830,000 at ang kanilang paid up capital ay magkakahalaga ng $7.5 million. At yung category D naman, enterprises specializing in high-end or luxury products with a paid-up capital of the equivalent in Philippine peso of $250,000 per store may be wholly owned by foreigners. Para mangyari yun, kailangan nagsispecialize ka sa high-end or luxury products at per store mo ay meron kang capitalization na $250,000. The foreign investor shall be required to maintain in the Philippines the full amount of the prescribed minimum capital. Kailangan dito yun. Unless the foreign investor has notified the SEC and the DTI of its intention to repatriate its capital and cease operations in the Philippines. The actual use in Philippine operations of the inwardly remitted minimum capital requirements shall be monitored by the SEC. So yun nabanggit natin, yun yung inwardly remitted minimum capital requirements. Hindi, yun lang yung paid up capital requirements at saka hindi, yun lang yung paid up capital requirements at saka yung capital requirements para bumuo ng store. Pero yung magiging kikitain nila dito, inwardly remitted minimum capital requirements, i-monitor yan ng SEC. Failure ng retail stores shall secure failure retail stores. Ano yun? Failure retail stores shall secure a certification from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and DTI, which will verify or confirm inward remittance of the minimum required capital investment. Yung kinikita ng kanilang minimum required capital investment, yun yung inward remittance. Malamang dito yun. Kinikita rito yun. Okay, Section 6, foreign investors acquiring shares of stock of local retailers. Foreign investors acquiring shares from existing retail stores, whether or not publicly listed, whose net worth is in excess of the peso equivalent of $2.5 million, may purchase only up to a minimum of 60% of the equity thereof within the first 2 years from the effectivity of this act. So, pwede na they may acquire the remaining percentage consistent with the allowable foreign participation as herein provided. So, sa ngayon, siguro naman, itong batas na to lagpas na ng 2 years nung ma-enact ito. So, pwede na raw sila basta 2.5 million na halaga ng shares of stock sa local retailers natin dito. Okay. Napapalakas naman nun yung ekonomiya natin, no? Maraming mga mayayamang dayuhan na nagkikater sa luxury na pangangailangan nila Derek Ramsey, Section 7, public offering of shares of stock. All retail trade enterprises under categories B and C in which foreign ownership exceeds 80% of equity shall offer a minimum of 30% of their equity to the public through any stock exchange in the Philippines within 8 years from their start of operations. Section 8, qualification of foreign retailers. No foreign retailer shall be allowed to engage in retail trade in the Philippines unless all the following qualifications are met. Okay, pag foreign retailer ka, kailangan mo ng a minimum of $200 million net worth in its parent corporation for categories B and C, and $50 million net worth in its parent corporation for category D. Letter B, 5 retailing branches of franchises in operation anywhere around the world unless such retailers has at least one store capitalized at a minimum of $25 million. So, kunwari, isa lang yung store mo, pero ang capital naman ng store mo na yun ay $25 million sa Beverly Hills. Good ka na. Letter C, 5-year track record in retailing. And letter D, only nationals from or judicial entities formed or incorporated in countries which allow the entry of Filipino retailers shall be allowed to engage in retail trade in the Philippines. So, lilinawin natin yung mga dayuhan na inaalaw natin dito ay yung mga dayuhan na kung saan nanggaling sa bansa na kung saan inaalaw din yung mga Pilipino to engage in retail trade sa kanila. Okay. Ayos na yan. Okay. Tingnan lang natin yung DTI ang kanyang implementing agency. Okay, tingnan natin yung mga prohibited activities ng qualified foreign retailers. They shall not be allowed to engage in certain retailing activities outside their accredited stores through the use of mobile or rolling stores or carts, the use of sales representatives, door-to-door selling, restaurants and sari-sari stores, and such other similar retailing activities. Di sila pwede ron, provided that a detailed list of prohibited activities shall hereafter be formulated by the DTI. So, yung retail activity mo lang. And ako, I interpret this as kung pinayagan sila sa jewelry, dun lang sila, yun lang ang kanilang accreditation. Again, implementing agency, DTI. Sabi rito, the DTI in coordination with the SEC, the NEDA, and the BSP shall formulate and issue the implementing rules and regulations necessary to implement this act within 90 days after its approval. Any person daw who shall be found guilty of violation of any provision of this act, malamang dayuhan yun, shall be punished by imprisonment of not less than 6 years, hindi bababa sa 6 na taon, and 6 years and 1 day, but not more than 8 years, and the fine of not less than 1 million pesos, but not more than 20 million pesos. So kahit mayamang dayuhan ka pa, even if you are a rich foreigner, you do not want to mess and violate RA 8762 or the Retail Trade Liberalization Act of the Philippines. So doon nagtatapos ang session natin ngayon, no? Mag-pray muna tayo, no? Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Again, sana samahan niyo ulit ako sa susunod na magbasa-basa ng mga batas at subukan natin itong ipaliwanag at unawain in layman's term.